I want to begin by acknowledging something that is obvious to anyone in this room. I am in the minority. Today we heard from approximately 50 speakers. I stand as one of those very few voices offering a different perspective, and that imbalance speaks volumes. But it does not speak to wrongdoing. It speaks to something else. It speaks to the force of a narrative that has, in many cases, moved ahead of the evidence required to sustain it. A narrative that has become so widely accepted in certain spaces that it no longer requires precision to be repeated, only conviction. And when we have seen what happens when narratives of this kind go unchallenged. Because when complex realities are reduced to moral absolutes, when the entire systems are defined by accusation rather than evidence, and when those accusations are repeated often enough to feel self-evident, the consequences are not theoretical, they are real. If we're going to talk about policing, then we need to be willing to look at policing in its full context. In the year 2000, in Ramallah, two Israeli reservists, Vadim Nozrich and Yosef Avrami, may their memories be a blessing, were detained by Palestinian Authority police. They were not protected. They were handed over to a mob. They were lynched inside a police station, their bodies ripped apart. This is what policing looks like when it fails completely. Now let's fast forward to October 7th. At the police station in Sderot, Israeli police officers were not faced with a routine situation. They were confronted with heavily armed terrorists during what would become the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. They did not abandon their posts. They did not turn over those in their custody. They ran toward danger. They fought to protect civilians. They fought to hold their ground, and 11 of them were killed in the line of duty. These were police officers acting in the most fundamental role of policing, which is to protect life even at the cost of their own. This is what policing looks like when it does not fail, and that is a standard of courage and duty that any city, including Edmonton, should value. And that contrast matters. Because when context like this is absent from the conversation, the conclusions that follow are not simply incomplete, they are distorted. Let me also address something that was repeatedly blurred throughout this meeting. The Israeli police is not the IDF. It does not conduct military operations in Gaza. It does not administer the Palestinian Authority. It does not patrol international borders. These are separate institutions with separate mandates. Collapsing those distinctions is not analysis. It is simply inaccuracy. We also heard repeated use of the words genocide and apartheid. These are not casual descriptors. They are legal terms with specific definitions developed to describe the most extreme forms of human conduct. To use them without meeting that threshold is not a deepening of criticism. It is a departure from precision. And when language loses precision, it does not elevate a conversation, it destabilizes it. There was also a recurring suggestion that concerns about anti-Semitism are raised way too quickly or too easily. So let me address that directly. Anti-Semitism is not defined by discomfort. It is defined by content. When the world's only Jewish state is accused of the most extreme crimes without clear and demonstrable evidence, when its legitimacy is treated as uniquely conditional, and when standards are applied to it that are not applied elsewhere, that is not simply criticism. That is a pattern, and patterns can be recognized. If you take some of the language that was used here today and replace the word Israel with the word Jew, the result is not a sharper critique of policy. It is language that begins to echo something much older and much more dangerous. That should give all of us pause. I also want to return to the central question before this commission. What specifically has Chief Dreichel done that has caused demonstrable harm to a community in Edmonton? Not an association, not a perception, not a narrative, a specific action with a measurable impact, because accountability requires definition. Without it, we are not evaluating conduct, we are responding to conclusions that have already been decided in advance. This is not about defending every action of Israel. It is not about dismissing concern. It is about insisting that serious claims be held to serious standards. Because if we abandon those standards, we do not just lose clarity. We lose the ability to think carefully, to judge fairly, and to speak responsibly. And when that happens, it is not only this conversation that is affected, it is every conversation that follows. Because once words like genocide and apartheid are no longer anchored to their meaning, they do not become more powerful, they become less meaningful. And when language loses its meaning, truth does not disappear all at once, it fades, one misuse at a time. Thank you.